I didn't say a word when my brother walked into the restaurant 45 minutes late, sat down across from me, and ordered the most expensive thing on the menu without looking at me once. That's how it always was. That's how it had always been. Let me back up. I'm 31 years old. I work in insurance fraud investigation, which means my entire job is looking for things people try to hide. Inconsistencies, gaps, the small lie buried inside a bigger lie. I'm good at it. I've been doing it for 6 years, and in that time I've caught people faking car accidents, staging house fires, and once, memorably, a man who claimed his boat sank in Lake Michigan while he was actively sailing it in Florida. People think they're smarter than the paper trail. They never are. My brother is 28. His name is Grant. He has never held a job for longer than 11 months. He is charming in the way that certain animals are charming. Bright-eyed, quick to smile, instantly likable if you don't know what he actually is. My parents think he hung the moon. They have thought this since the day he was born, and nothing, not the DUI at 19, not the college he dropped out of, not the 3 girlfriends he borrowed money from and never paid back, has changed that. I was 12 when he was born, old enough to understand what was happening, young enough that it took me years to put a name to it. When Grant arrived, I became the responsible one, the capable one, which, in practice, meant the one who didn't need anything. My parents were good people, I think, in the way that people who've never examined themselves can be good. They weren't cruel. They just had a story about us that they liked, and they weren't interested in facts that complicated it. Grant was sensitive. I was strong. Grant needed protection. I could handle things on my own. The first time I noticed my credit score, I was 23. I pulled my report as part of a training exercise at work. We were learning the forensic side of identity fraud, and I saw a medical debt from 2017 that I didn't recognize. A collection account, $412. I traced it back to an urgent care visit in our hometown. I hadn't been in our hometown in 2017. I had been in Austin at a company conference. Grant had been in our hometown in 2017. Grant had sprained his wrist playing pickup basketball and apparently decided that my social security number was a reasonable way to handle the copay. I called my mother. I explained what I found. I told her this was identity fraud, technically, that it had affected my credit. She said, and I am not paraphrasing, he probably just panicked. You know how he gets. Can't you just take care of it quietly? It would devastate him if he thought he'd hurt you. I paid the $412. I disputed the collection. I didn't say anything else. I told myself it was a one-time thing. It wasn't a one-time thing. Over the next 3 years, working in fraud investigation, I got very good at checking my own financial records. It became habit, monthly credit pulls, alert flags on my SSN, monitoring on my bank accounts, and every 8 or 9 months, something would turn up. A credit inquiry I didn't authorize. A store card opened in my name at a Walmart 3 states away. A payday loan for $800 that had gone to collections before I even knew it existed. Every single one traced back to my hometown. Every single one traced to a time Grant was there and I wasn't. I documented everything. That's what I do. I kept a file, dates, amounts, account numbers, dispute outcomes. I didn't confront Grant directly because I'd already learned that confronting Grant meant confronting my parents, and confronting my parents meant being told I was being cruel, selfish, dramatic. So I built a file, and I waited, and I told myself I was being strategic rather than just terrified of what would happen when it finally came to a head. It came to a head on a Tuesday in March. I got an alert, the kind I'd set up specifically on my SSN, that someone had attempted to open a credit line at a furniture store in Davenport, Iowa. The application was flagged because my credit monitoring service had a security freeze in place that I'd activated 6 months earlier. They couldn't open it, but someone had tried. I pulled the attempted application through a fraud report request. The address listed for my application was my parents' house. The phone number was my brother's cell phone. I had him. Not just this one. All of them. I had 6 years of documentation. I had a file that would have made my supervisor proud. And for the first time, I sat with it and thought clearly about what came next. I could go to the police. Technically, what Grant had done was federal SSN fraud, identity theft, multiple counts. He could go to prison. My parents would never forgive me, but that had stopped feeling like the deterrent it once was. Or I could wait and see what my family did when I showed them the file. I chose to wait, not because I was soft, because I wanted to know who they were. I called my mother and told her I needed to talk to the family. Something important. She suggested Sunday dinner. I suggested a restaurant, neutral ground, public space, nowhere for anyone to storm off dramatically. She agreed, and the way she agreed, a little too quickly, a little too cheerfully, made me think she already knew what was coming and had a plan of her own. I was right. I showed up at the restaurant at 6 o'clock on a Sunday in April. My mother was already there, sitting very straight, wearing the blouse she wore to serious occasions. My father was next to her. Grant arrived 45 minutes later, ordered the ribeye, and still hadn't looked at me. My father cleared his throat. He was the kind of man who cleared his throat before difficult conversations, the way other people cracked their knuckles. A ritual, a warm-up. "We've been talking," he said, "as a family." I waited. Grant has gotten himself into a situation. He said, situation, the way you'd say, minor inconvenience. There are some debts, medical, some legal fees. He paused, some other things. "How much?" I asked. My mother lifted her water glass. My father said $94,000. I kept my face neutral. I'm good at that. 6 years of depositions and fraud interviews will teach you to keep your face neutral. "Okay," I said, "and why are you telling me?" My father put both hands flat on the table, which was something he did when he thought he was being reasonable. "You're in a good position financially. You don't have kids. You own your condo. We thought as a family that you could help." "Help," I said. "Take out a home equity line," my mother said. She said it like she'd rehearsed it, which she had. "Use the equity in your condo. You could get the full amount easily, and Grant would pay you back over time." I looked at my brother. Grant was cutting his steak. He had not said one word. "Grant," I said, "do you have something you want to say to me?" He looked up. He had my mother's eyes, light brown, long-lashed, the kind of eyes people called kind. "I'm sorry you're being put in this position," he said, "but I'm really struggling right now, and family helps family." Family helps family. Verbatim, he'd gotten that from her. "I want to make sure I understand," I said, still calm, still measured. "You want me to take out a loan against my home. The home I bought with money I earned. The home I have a mortgage on. To cover debts that Grant accumulated. And Grant will pay me back." "Over time," my mother said. "With interest?" I asked. My father's jaw tightened. "That's not what family does." I looked at all three of them. My mother with her rehearsed speech and her serious occasion blouse. My father with his hands flat on the table. My brother eating a steak he'd ordered, knowing I might be the one paying for it. "I need a few days to think about this," I said. My mother reached across the table and covered my hand with hers, and her expression shifted, just slightly, just enough for me to see it, the relief under the concern, the certainty that she'd won. "Of course," she said. "Take your time." I drove home and opened my laptop. Here is something people don't know about home equity lines of credit. They take, on average, 2 to 6 weeks to close. The bank has to appraise your property. There are disclosures, waiting periods, paperwork. You can't just wake up on a Monday and have $100,000 by Friday. What you can do in about 48 hours. If you already have a buyer lined up. If you've already had preliminary conversations. If you've already decided that this particular asset is more liability than home, is sell a condo. I had been thinking about selling for 8 months. The HOA fees had gone up twice in 2 years. The neighbor below me had a dog that apparently suffered from insomnia. And I had been watching the market in my neighborhood specifically, because that's the kind of person I am. And I knew that the 2-bedroom units in my building were moving fast, mostly to investors buying cash. I had the name of one such investor from a colleague whose partner had sold to him 6 months earlier. I had texted him in February just to ask some questions. We had a conversation, he was interested. We had not moved forward because I hadn't decided. On Sunday night, I decided. I texted him at 8:47 p.m. He called me back at 9:15. By Monday afternoon, we had a verbal agreement on a number I was satisfied with. By Tuesday evening, I had signed a purchase and sale agreement. The closing was scheduled for 3 weeks out, with a rent-back period that let me stay in the unit for 60 days while I figured out my next step. I did not call my parents. I did not tell my brother. I did not mention it to anyone in my family. I did do one other thing. I printed out my fraud documentation file, all of it 6 years, organized by date, and I made 2 copies. One I kept. One I mailed to a P.O. box I'd rented specifically for this purpose, with a letter to my own attorney explaining what it contained. Then I made a dinner reservation, a different restaurant this time, nicer. The kind of place that had cloth napkins and a sommelier. I texted my mother and told her I'd made a decision and I'd like to meet on Saturday to discuss it. She texted back a heart emoji. Saturday. My mother, my father, my brother, and me. White tablecloths, a bread basket no one was touching because everyone was too tense. My father started, "Have you thought about what we discussed?" "I have," I said. And I reached into my bag and set a folder on the table. Not the fraud file, not yet. Just a single sheet of paper, a copy of my closing disclosure. "I can't take out a home equity line against my condo," I said, "because I don't own the condo anymore. I sold it last week." The silence was the kind that has weight. My mother opened her mouth, closed it. My father's hands, which had been flat on the table again, curled slightly. Grant set down his fork. "You sold my mother started. "I sold my condo," I said. "Cash buyer. It closed this week." That was a slight compression of timeline, but accurate enough. "The proceeds are already in a brokerage account." "So you have the money," my father said. His voice had changed. Something in it had gone flat and hard. "You have the money and you're choosing not to help your brother." "I have the money," I agreed, "and I'm choosing to do something else with it." My father leaned forward. "And what is that?" "That's not something I need to explain to you," I said pleasantly. My mother started crying. Not real crying, my mother's crying, the kind with full eye contact, designed to be witnessed. "We're your family," she said. "We're asking you for help. Do you have any idea how much we've done for you? How much we've sacrificed?" My brother said nothing. He had his arms crossed, and he was looking at the breadbasket. "I want to talk about something else," I said. I reached back into my bag. I set the second folder on the table, the fraud file. Not the whole thing. I wasn't a fool. I wasn't giving them original documents, but a summary, a timeline, a list of accounts, amounts, and dates, with Grant's phone number and my parents' address highlighted on each attempted application. "What is this?" my father said. It wasn't a question. "That's a summary of 6 years of unauthorized use of my social security number," I said. "Credit lines, medical accounts, a payday loan. The total across all accounts is just under $11,000. Most of it I've already resolved on my end. There's a copy of this with my attorney." My mother had stopped fake crying. She was staring at the folder like it was something alive. "Grant," I said. He looked up. "I know it was you. I've always known it was you. I want you to know that I know, and that I have documented proof, and that the only reason this isn't currently sitting on a detective's desk is because I wanted to have this conversation first." Grant's expression went through something. I watched it move across his face. The charm, which was the first thing that appeared and the first to go, and then something younger and smaller underneath it. Something that might have been shame if you were a different person. "I didn't think," he started. "I know you didn't," I said. "That's been the problem your entire life." My father stood up, literally stood up at the table, which caused the couple at the next table to glance over. "You're threatening your own family," he said. "You're going to report your own brother to the police over $11,000? Do you know what that would do to him? To this family?" I stayed seated, calm. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm informing you of facts. What happens with those facts is a conversation we can have, but it won't be today, and it won't be at this table, and it definitely won't be with Grant making decisions about which steak to order while we discuss it. My mother grabbed my arm. Her hand was shaking, genuinely shaking, for the first time all night. "Please," she said. "Please, he's your brother. He made mistakes, he knows that, but you can't do this. You can't." I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at her face. She loved him. She genuinely loved him, in the broken way that parents love the child they've spent 30 years protecting from consequences. I understood it. I didn't think it excused anything. "I'm not doing anything tonight," I said. "I'm going home. I'm going to think. And I would strongly suggest that Grant spend some time doing the same." I left $200 on the table for the bill. I'd ordered sparkling water and a salad, and I walked out. There's a particular feeling of walking out of a restaurant when everyone at your table is still sitting there. It's lighter than you'd think. The air outside felt different. Cleaner, maybe. Or just mine. My mother called 4 times that night. My father called twice. Grant sent a text that said, "We need to talk," and then, "20 minutes later, please." I read them all, and I went to sleep. Over the next 3 weeks, a few things happened. Grant called me from a number I didn't recognize. He'd figured out I'd blocked him and left a 9-minute voicemail that went through, in order: apology, justification, more apology, an explanation involving a medical bill from when he was 22 that he swore he'd paid back and that I had apparently just never noticed. And finally, a quiet, desperate segment where he asked me not to go to the police and said he'd been trying to be better, and he knew he'd hurt me, and he was sorry. I listened to that voicemail 4 times. There were things in it I almost believed. That's the thing about Grant. He was always most convincing when he had nothing left to lose. My mother sent me a letter, a physical letter, 3 pages, handwritten. She wrote about the night I was born, and about a camping trip we'd taken when I was 7 that I barely remembered, and about how proud she was of the woman I'd become. And then, on the 3rd page, like it was just a small thing she was tossing in, asked if there was any way I could see my way to taking out a personal loan instead of a home equity line, since I clearly had the assets to secure one, and that way Grant could get a fresh start and we could all move forward. She had written 3 pages about a camping trip I barely remembered in order to ask me for a personal loan. I filed a police report. Not a full criminal complaint, not yet. Just a report, a matter of record, documenting the unauthorized use of my SSN over 6 years. I submitted my documentation. I worked with a detective I'd actually crossed paths with professionally, which made the conversation more efficient than it might have been otherwise. She was thorough and she was kind, and she told me that based on what I'd submitted, the case was worth pursuing. Whether to pursue it fully was still my decision. I knew that. I sat with it for a while. What I decided, ultimately, was that I would not be the person who protected Grant from this. Not because I wanted him to suffer, or not only because of that, but because the evidence was clear, and protecting him meant lying to the system I'd spent 6 years working inside, and I wasn't willing to do that. Not for him. The detective called my parents as part of the investigation. I don't know what that conversation was like, and I don't particularly want to. My mother left me a voicemail after that was different from all the others. Shorter, quieter, no camping trips. Just her voice saying my name twice, and then the call ending. I moved into a rental 2 towns over. It was a 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building with a community garden on the roof that I hadn't expected to like, and found that I loved. I planted tomatoes in May. I watched them grow slowly through June. Some mornings I sat on the roof with coffee and thought about absolutely nothing, and those mornings were the best ones I could remember in years. I am not going to tell you that cutting off your family feels good. It doesn't, exactly. It feels like the aftermath of a surgery, correct, necessary, and painful in ways that keep surprising you. There are moments when I forget, and I think I should tell my mom about this, and then I remember, and the remembering is its own small loss every time. But here's the other thing. My credit score, as of last month, is 791. Every account is mine. Every inquiry I recognize. Every single financial record attached to my name is a record I created. I was talking to a woman I work with. She's newer, she's learning the forensic side like I did, and she asked me how I stay so calm in interviews, how I sit across from people who are lying to my face and don't react. I told her what my old supervisor told me way back when I started. The truth has a texture to it. Lies are smooth. They've been handled too many times, worried over, polished. The truth has edges. It catches on things. Once you know what to feel for, you can always tell the difference. I know the texture of my own life now. It has edges. It catches on things. Some of them are painful. It's mine. I used to think that what happened to me was a story about betrayal. Now I think it was a story about cause and effect. Slow, patient, and completely indifferent to what anyone wished were true. Grant didn't steal my identity once. He did it across 6 years, in small amounts, in the way that people do things they believe will never catch up to them. And for a long time, they did it. Because I kept quiet. Because I told myself it was easier. Because every time I thought about saying something out loud, I imagined my mother's face and the camping trip she'd write about in her letter years later. And I chose the path of least immediate pain. That choice had a cost. It always does. Not a punishment from anywhere outside myself, just the natural result of a thing left unaddressed. Silence has weight. It accumulates. What eventually changed wasn't my anger. It was my clarity. There's a kind of intelligence that has nothing to do with being clever. It's the kind that asks, what is actually true here and what am I pretending isn't? I'd spent years being very good at my job, finding fraud, reading documents, following paper trails, and coming home and refusing to apply any of that to my own life. The folder I eventually built, the one I set on that white tablecloth on the Saturday night, wasn't built in a moment of rage. It was built in the quiet accumulation of choosing to see clearly. That's the harder thing. Rage is easy. Honesty about what you're looking at, especially when you love the people you're looking at, takes something steadier. And then there's the question of what you do once you see it. I made a police report. I sold my condo. I moved 2 towns over and planted tomatoes on a rooftop I hadn't expected to love. None of those decisions were dramatic in the moment. They were just the next right thing. And then the next one after that. That's what I keep coming back to when I think about where I am now versus where I was. Not one heroic act. Just a series of small decisions that required me to keep choosing, again and again, not to look away. My mother still thinks I was cruel. Maybe she always will. I've had to make peace with the fact that I can't control the story she tells herself, any more than Grant could stop the paper trail he was leaving in mine. The outcome of our choices isn't something we get to negotiate. It just is. What I know is this: I'm 31 years old. My credit score is 791. Every account attached to my name is one I opened. Every financial record is one I created. I have a life that is fully, documentably mine. And that is not a small thing. That is, in fact, everything. The tomatoes came in red and heavy by August. I ate them standing on the roof in the early morning before the heat set in. I didn't call anyone. I didn't need to. Some mornings, that's exactly what freedom feels like.